field. So, well, welcome everybody. Wonderful to see you all here, and welcome to the 7th annual Acadia Winter Festival. We're excited to have you here, to have our festival, which this year is a mix of a few in-person events and lots of virtual events as well. And there's even a little bit of snow outside. You never know from year to year what we're going to get. Sometimes there's no snow. Several years ago, we had to actually cancel all the Sunday events because of a big snowstorm. So it's kind of the exciting part of the Winter Festival. So I'm Nick Fisicelli, President and CEO with Schoodic Institute at Acadia National Park. We're a nonprofit partner of the National Park Service and Center for Inspiring Science, Learning, and Community in a Rapidly Changing World. With our National Park Service partners, we co-lead the Research Learning Center here in Acadia, including our wonderful campus at Schoodic Point. So it seems that there's much to feel sad about these days, not just the long winter nights, but the pandemic and the many other ills that are so apparent in society today. I know for me personally, being out in nature, especially in this wonderful national park, is the most effective therapy that I know. But I'm sure there are many other tips and skills to learn to cope with these sorts of things. And so I'm super pleased to introduce our speaker, Elizabeth Clayton. She is a Northern Light Health's Employee Wellness Specialist. For the last 7 years, she's designed and delivered an encompassing range of holistic well-being programs for employees across Northern Light's 15 organizations that support them in all dimensions of their health journey. In addition to supporting the biometric screenings, running the employee wellness platform, and developing quarterly programs, Elizabeth writes a weekly column for Northern Light and community members on being whole and healthy, and co-leads Catch Your Breath, a twice weekly 10-minute mindfulness and guided meditation Zoom get-together. So Elizabeth also serves on a number of committees, including Northern Light's Medical Advisory Group Committee on Provider Burnout, an area of special interest to her. So welcome Elizabeth, and just ask everybody to, you can mute yourselves, and you can also turn off your cameras during the presentation, just to preserve bandwidth. At the end of the presentation, you're welcome to unmute yourself to ask questions, or throughout you can use the chat feature here and type some questions into the chat box. I will have to leave early as I'm leading the walk at Schoodic Woods today at 1 p.m. But you will be in Elizabeth's capable hands. So with that, welcome Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Nick. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for spending some time with me today. Happy Friday. I am so glad to be here with you all talking about sadness. If ever there were a winter for sadness, this might be it. And then layer on seasonal affective disorder, and what are we supposed to do with ourselves? Maybe just get good at being sad. And while being sad probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind when you think about talents you might like to develop, it would be a pretty mighty handy skill. After all, if happiness can be a skill, why not sadness? The more we understand about happiness and how it happens, we have come to realize that there is an element of work involved. It's not just a matter of being a naturally happy person, though some of us are more biologically wired that way. There is also a practical side to happiness that lets us set the stage for happiness to happen. And in that same way, we can develop a practical skill for doing sad well. But to do that, we have to understand enough about the mechanisms at play in the experience of sadness to work with those mechanisms very skillfully. But before we get into anything specific, let's just think about this. If sadness were a skill, then what? What would that mean to you? Take just a minute to ponder that for yourself. If sadness were a skill, then what? What does that say to you? Use the chat function if you like. Let me know. So here's what came to mind for me. If sadness were a skill, then it wouldn't be so scary. I would feel like I have more control. I wouldn't feel so helpless. I could take pride in myself and my ability rather than feeling wrong about who I am. I would feel more able than disabled. I would feel better and be better able to access happiness. Life wouldn't close in around me so much, and I would have more capacity to enjoy life. Anybody come up with anything different? I'm not seeing anything in the chat function, but if somebody else is, just let me know. All right. Well, any of those ways that I talked about and anything that you might have come up with, those are all good things, and they definitely improve the experience of living. So, seasonal affective disorder, what is it? Well, there is much overlap in how all kinds of sadnesses feel and what you can skillfully do with them. For those with seasonal affective disorder, it's important to understand what's actually happening in the body and how it needs to be recalibrated. So, what it is, it's a mood association with a season. We typically think of it happening in the winter, but there's also a spring lethargy. It is a type of official depression under the umbrella of major depressive disorder, and it affects between 2 and 10% of the population. What's interesting is that it wasn't discovered until 1984 when a Dr. Norman Rosenthal, a psychiatrist, finally put a name to what he had been experiencing himself when he moved from South Africa to New York. So after he grew up in a sunny, warm climate in New York, he noticed his mood dropped when the temperatures dropped and the days got darker. And then one of his patients in 1980 mentioned these same seasonal changes in himself. At that point, Dr. Rosenthal speculated that insufficient melatonin might have something to do with it. Melatonin, sometimes called the hormone of darkness, is primarily released at night to help regulate our sleep cycle. And then when the sun comes up and hits special receptors in the eyes, melatonin production is suppressed, signaling the body to wake up. That sets us up for our internal clock, the circadian rhythm. But then there comes a big seasonal mess up when the days get shorter and the nights get longer, but we still get up at the same time. So it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch between the body's circadian rhythms and the timing of the sunrise and the sunset. Now, some people are just able to go with it. They're able to adjust in that particular way, but not all bodies smoothly accept that disruption, and they just can't calibrate correctly. And so helping the body recalibrate is the first skill set for those with seasonal affective disorder. And because seasonal affective disorder is all about light and light's role in regulating us, we need to be very tactical in our relationship to it to make sure we're not sending our body mixed signals about when we are awake and when we are asleep. So here's what we can do. We can take a low dose of melatonin at just the right time, and it can help us reset the internal clock. Routine supports our internal clock's cadence, going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. And we can be very tactical about our light. We can watch the devices, the night lights, the blue light, the street lights, and not confuse our body. And we can get as much light exposure during the waking hours as possible to reinforce our alignment with nature. And then, of course, we can supplement daylight with a sad ultraviolet light. We can fake nature. And so as you can probably see, many of these calibration techniques are really good for everybody, whether sad is at play or not. Who it affects? It affects women 4 times more than men. It may be more prevalent in people who have a sluggish serotonin transmission in the brain, and it's more likely if you have a family member with SAD. And then there are things that make the effect of low light exposure even worse. Stress, for instance. Stress often happens to people with SAD, and they have a diminished ability to handle stress, which can push them deeper into depression. And then when we don't feel good, we often have less ambition to exercise, which is unfortunate because exercise is often as effective as drugs and therapy. So it's not a benefit we want to miss out on. And then there's eating more. Not surprisingly, SAD brings out the cravings for sweets and carbs, but this can also bring on a disastrous cycle of not feeling good about yourself emotionally and then not feeling good physically, which makes you want carbs even more for comfort. And it's a dangerous loop to get sucked into. And then it becomes even more important to eat as balanced as possible and plan the treats as something to look forward to. Okay, so all of that was a bit of a downer and not very uplifting. So we're going to take a break and do something skillful. We're going to add a dash of magic and joy to our experience of life, and we're going to see what's possible to do with a long, cold, dark winter. Okay, so now I have to do a little bit of gymnastics to set this up. All right, I don't want to. Okay, here we go.
The sound coming out from inside the instrument. And I was so excited by what I heard that I put on my skis. I skied all the way down to the village. And I told them what had happened to me and how excited I was. They pretty much thought I was a kook. Well, on that day, I sort of had a dream, a vision of what could one day become. Welcome to my dream. The ice instrument is made of frozen water. We're made of melted water. And that physical connection opens the door for a spiritual connection. And for me, when I listen to an ice instrument, it just makes me happy. It's one thing to build an ice instrument. It's another thing to maintain it and use it throughout time. The ice is always sublimating away into the atmosphere. Players get up next to the instruments. You got hot bodies next to cold instruments and they're melting. And the audience walks in. Suddenly the temperature rises because they're breathing. In that case, the strings on the stringed instruments begin to get softer and the pitch goes down on stringed instruments. On the pipe instruments, for instance, the Rolandophone, the tubes and the xylophone and so on, those begin to go up. So you've got the orchestra going in two different directions. It took me quite a while really to understand that all of the tuning and all just the complete disaster was because of the temperature fluctuation. And that eventually led me to realizing that I need to build my own architecture that can ventilate the heat from the audience away from the orchestra. And that's how we came to the basic design of the concert hall that we have with the two domes, which accommodates for letting out the heat of the audience and keeping the instruments in a cool. You know, I think of magic, really, the definition for me of magic is unbelievable but happening. And I think that in the long run is the kaboom possibility for ice music to really affect the world, the people of the world, in this release of really joy when your disbelief dissolves. Without a song, dance what are we? So I sing, thank you for the music, for giving
into me.
The Scandinavian.
Thank you for tonight. Have a lovely evening.
All right, hang on a second. I'm gonna. Okay, let me get rid of that. Okay, and we're back. So just before we get to the skills, let's just take a minute to investigate how this experience of low mood presents. There are probably common ways we all feel sad, and then there are also some very specific to ourselves ways that we might struggle with moods. I don't have seasonal affective disorder, I just have plain old mood disorder. So I can't speak to what seasonal affective feels like specifically, but I've heard it feels basically like 5 months of jet lag, like you just can't calibrate to the right time zone. That would make sense. Now, if there's anyone out there who can fill us in more specifically about how sad feels, just share in the chat. And then make sure if there are things in the chat that you let me know, because I'm not actually seeing it on my screen. But beyond the specific feelings that are associated with sad, there is much overlap with general sadness, depression, anxiety, and all the other emotions that make it really difficult to feel good and function well. So to dive a little deeper, we could unofficially break distressing moods down into 3 general categories, each sometimes calling for a specific skill. So I'm going to call the first one, and I just made these categories up, they're very unofficial. I'm going to call the first one dropping into a dark hole. It's when you find it very hard to mobilize because nothing seems good. And in that dark hole, it changes the way you see. There is no perspective from the dark hole. And then, second, there is just a lingering sense of lowness, one you may not even be fully aware of until you feel better. It's just a lowness and a flatness, and it could be caused by chronic stress or lack of balance or general discontent with the way things are. There is probably a lot of potential for that right now, that's for sure. And then there is the acute stuff, where something happens and it sends you into a tizzy and you have to deal with yourself and your overwhelming feelings right then. So that, as I said, is just an unofficial breakdown of the different categorical variations on mood. And it's based on my perception and my experience of it. So for what I've left out, or if you have a different experience of it, let us know what it's like for you. And I think it's important to be very clear about what this actual experience is and not let ourselves get away with keeping that part, the specific part, at arm's length, where it becomes not all that real. It's hard to imagine someone else having to scrape themselves up off the floor to launch into their day. But when that gets acknowledged and we talk about it, then the tactics we're going to talk about in just a moment for dealing with yourself, they take on a different kind of urgency. They become something we absolutely must do and feel are worth doing. Okay, so let's get down finally to the business of these skills. First of all, we already know that calibrating our body systems to be in sync with nature is first. And then we've got to be able to leverage what's available to us. All right, the first thing is leveraging the biochemistry of nature. That's going to be something that Nick definitely already talked about and can relate to. We have leverage, and we have a whole lot of things we can leverage in working skillfully with how we feel. And nature, as I said, is one, and it's huge. Nature speaks to us. There is a biologically driven resonance between us and nature, and it's called biophilia. You know, it's kind of interesting. I had read once that trees in particular, we have a strong relationship with them. And that if you ask people to think about a particular tree from their childhood, they come up with one. Trees come to mind. It's like we have these special relationships with trees. And that tree right there in the picture, that's a tree on West Broadway in Bangor. And right over here, right over here. Now I think you can see my cursor. Right over there is Stephen King's house, just for frame of reference. And so anyway, nature, it's one of our most powerful and natural antidepressants, and we can't afford not to use it. In fact, there was a fascinating study in New York City about how just seeing something green and growing lowered stress significantly. And they determined this by dividing their experiment participants who all lived in a very concrete sort of world into two groups. One group was given the opportunity to walk by some trees in their day, and the other ones just stayed in their concrete world. And the ones that had even minimal exposure to growing things had significantly lowered levels of cortisol when they checked their blood. And then, of course, we've already talked a lot about sunlight, and we already know that we have a primal relationship with sunlight. So getting a good dose of it every day energizes us and regulates us. So nature, it's really powerful, and it's a very important one for us to be able to leverage. And then there is routine. Routine is like a manual circadian rhythm. There is a momentum to routine that can carry us along with it. It's forward movement, and forward movement is good, especially when we're trying to get through a calendar of darkness. So doing routine things with regularity is very stabilizing. It's very supportive of our state of mind, especially when we are biologically wired to get a boost from them, like nature, like sunlight. And so every single day, it's important to get outside. You have to go outside. You may not want to, but you need to. Every single day, it's important to exercise. You have to make yourself move. You may not want to, but you need to. It has an impact on our biochemistry. And with exercise, that can be particularly tricky. People have all kinds of feelings about exercise, and often when we're not feeling good, we don't have the motivation or the discipline or willpower to do anything, especially not exercise. But we can work with ourselves and get ourselves to go along with it in kind of a hedgy way. We can tell ourselves that we'll just show up. We'll show up, but we're not going to give ourselves over to it. But the thing with exercise is that there's often some magic that happens just when you start moving your body a little bit. There's a willingness to move it just a little more and just a little more. And then before you know it, the body actually wants to move. Our mind might not want to move, but the body wants to move. And when it starts moving, we find that there's a little bit more willingness, and that's what we can leverage. We can leverage that willingness. And then every single day, there are ways that we can manage our stress with routine things that neurologically boost us, like mindfulness and meditation, like yoga, like comedy therapy, watching something funny, like even taking a shower. I had read once it was a memoir of, it was a CEO who had had a nervous breakdown and she had to take some time off. And so as she did for a year, she really thought very, very carefully about what it was that she needed to get herself kind of back in business and back in the game. And she came up with a list of things that she absolutely had to do every single day to ensure her well-being. And what she discovered is that showers was one of those things on the list, that every single day she needed to immerse herself in water. And I thought that was so interesting. That was very much an unusual type of tactic that I'd never come across before. But I realized how true it is when you think about a shower and how you can go into the shower feeling very ugly, feeling like the world, there is nothing good in it. And you can come out of the shower feeling like $1,000,000. So there is definitely something happening in the shower that speaks to our neurobiology. And then even doing simple things like making your bed, all of these things, all of these routine things either speak to us neurobiologically, and they also create a kind of a forward motion. They kind of give us the benefit of movement and not getting stuck. So we certainly don't want to get stuck in sadness. And then balance, leveraging balance. Balance is big. We're already out of whack so creating balance in other areas of our life can help to stabilize us. And food, we can literally balance the foods we eat, which will help us feel better physically and emotionally. And we can balance pressure. When we're struggling, we sometimes need to give ourselves a break and take the pressure off. But then if there is too much slack in our expectations for ourselves, then that lets us slide over to the edge and into the hole. So we've got to balance the pressure, balance putting it on and balance taking it off. And inside, outside. We know something biologically and psychologically happens when we go outside and remove the confinement that we're in. And then being outside in the bracing and exhilarating cold just makes coming back inside to the warmth wonderful. It's like how feeling really hungry makes food taste so much better. And then we balance the stabilizing routine with energizing excitement. As useful as routine is in helping us feel stable and steady, so is novelty in order to occasionally shake things up. And last but not least are our actual feelings. We do ourselves no favors when we push them down and try and escape for them, because they don't exactly go away, they just go underground. But we also do ourselves no favors if we let them run rampant. And so we need to toggle back and forth between acknowledging and feeling feelings, and then grounding ourselves and checking the accuracy of our perspective, because that's another thing that often we get very tunnel vision when we don't feel good. And so we need to do a double check with ourselves and just ask ourselves, is this accurate? How am I seeing things? Open the scope of the aperture of how we're looking at the world bigger. And then leverage the calendar. The calendar itself is a huge opportunity for leverage as well, starting first with how we view where we are in the calendar. And when we talk about the shape, when we talk about the shapes our world, what we talk about shapes the way we view our world. For instance, we could change the conversation. Instead of talking about all the bad things about the season, we could talk about the things that only this season offers, or that only really shine in this season, like soup, or fireplaces, or ice skating, or skiing, the beauty of the snow. We often talk a lot about the dread and drudgery of winter, so it would be a cultural shift to look at the season for what it gives us rather than what it takes of us. And that's what Scandinavians often do. I mean, they end up being in darkness at some point for several months, almost 20 hours up throughout the day. So anyway, how we see and what we say about our experience matters. It has an impact inside us. And so outings, other things to plan on the calendar, outings. Don't leave the calendar to chance and wait for things to just show up. Knowing that winter can be hard on you and it can be long, before it even gets here, start planning a few things that you would like to do or see that winter, like a festival of lights or roasting marshmallows around a fire pit, which is actually a good thing to do this winter with social distancing. Planning a ski or spa weekend, perhaps not this winter. And what kind of a primary project you are going to work on. So have some plans for winter. Events on a calendar create a rhythm and move things along, which protects against getting stuck in a hole. And people. Put people on the calendar. Just being in the midst of people can lift us up. Being engaged with people keeps us in the game. And then breath. The way we breathe can create very specific states of mind. And so it can be used very strategically. For instance, you can simmer down by breathing in slowly through your nose to the count of 4, then exhaling out to the count of 6, while pushing down on your heart a little bit, creating that pressure, because that activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is also our brake system. The sympathetic nervous system is our gas system, that's the fight or flight. And the parasympathetic is our rest and digest system. And so it puts the brakes on that. So when we breathe in and then we breathe out even more slowly on the exhale, creating that pressure on our chest, that's when we're putting the brakes on. But often when we're dealing with sad moods, we can get very low and we can get very low energy. So we can rev up by breathing in a short, quick breath for 2 counts, and then forcefully and quickly exhaling for 1. And so it goes like this. And that's called breath of fire. You might worry about whether doing this for too extended a period of time might send you into hyperventilation, and it absolutely could. So you do that about 30 seconds at a time, then you give yourself a break, and you might do a few more rounds of that. So that's a really good one to try. As a matter of fact, we have a few minutes right now, so why don't we all do that? Why don't we just spend about 30 seconds breathing in that particular way? So here we go. Inhale, 2, out. Okay, let's stop. And now I just want you to take an assessment of how you feel. Do you feel a little bit more energy? Okay. Now to balance your outlook, what you're going to do is just simply create some coherent breathing. You're going to breathe in to the count of 4, and you're going to breathe out to the count of 4. And these should be fairly long counts. It's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The idea is to even yourself out. So you want to give yourself as much time as you possibly can. So that's a balance. That's a balancing kind of breath work. And then when you're really heightened, you can do something kind of strange called alternate nostril breathing. And that's where you cover one nostril with your thumb and inhale through that open nostril. And then you use your ring finger to close the opposite nostril and exhale through that. And then you inhale through the same nostril and you toggle back and forth. So this looks a little weird, but I'll demonstrate. So you close one nostril with your thumb and you breathe in. And then with your ring finger, you close that nostril and you breathe out and back in through the same nostril. Toggle over. So that takes a fair amount of mind space in order to do that, which takes you out of whatever it is that you are in trouble with. If you're feeling really bad, or even if necessarily you can't sleep at night and your mind is racing, and so that calms you down. It gives you a focus. You have to think about it, and then you've got the challenge of breathing through only one nostril. So it's making you fight to breathe even more. So that's kind of I call that your rescue breath. Okay. So we just talked about a number of different tactics you could use to leverage. You can leverage your body by moving it every day. You can leverage nature by getting out in it. You can leverage food by balancing it, enjoying it, and making it work for you. You can leverage activity, alternating between cozy and exhilarating, and doing things that wake up your senses. You can leverage light, artificial or natural, soak it up. You can leverage routine, stick to a sleep schedule. You can leverage breathing. You can leverage perspective. You can leverage the rhythm of the calendar, and you can leverage the support of community and relationships. So that was it. Those are the skills, but there's a part of me that thinks you might be feeling like There was nothing landmark going on in these strategies. And I know, I wish these things were all a little more unusual and less humdrum myself than they are, because then they would feel more special and important. But I think these skills are actually more like metaphorical Tylenol for use when something hurts and to keep the pain away. So use these strategies all the time like medicine to keep ahead of the pain, and then treat with extra doses when a worse feeling comes up. And then enjoy that pain relief while it lasts, and expect to get through the season in that kind of way, where you're taking care of the pain relief and moving along in that particular kind of rhythm. And then if we were then to tally up all the pain-free minutes and hours and days we were able to amass at the winter's end, we would have a much bigger pile of pain-free minutes and hours and days than if we didn't do these things, if we didn't leverage these skills. So seeing these skills as a dose of pain relief when your psyche hurts or your heart hurts or your head hurts or your soul hurts might make these plain, humble, individual tactics feel more worth your while. Because the truth is, we do feel better when we go outside. We do feel better when we move. We do feel better when we don't hole up. We do feel better when we talk to people. And we do feel better when we look at something pretty or something happy. And we do feel better when we make our bed every single day. And so to wrap up, I want to share what being very skilled in sadness looks like. After I sent Northern Light employees an invitation to attend this presentation on the skill of being sad that I'm going to do for them next week, I heard back from one employee who wrote to tell me about how she came to be skilled at sadness. I want to read this to you. Sadness is definitely a skill, and I learned it when my daughter died suddenly. I trained myself to recognize and respect my sadness, but not to fear it, rather to keep it as a companion and not allow it to control me. Nowadays, if something happens that triggers my trauma, I actually lean into it in a controlled way. I'll take some time and listen to music that I know will make me cry. It's a catharsis, right? It definitely helps me. I wanted to share my thoughts with you because being good at being sad is something that sort of became one of my foundational rest of life goals in the summer of 1998. And that was the summer that she lost Casey. Casey, that's Casey, the little girl that Robin lost in that picture. And that picture was taken a day or two before she died, wearing her big sister's shoes. She was 20 months old in that photo. But what I know about Robin, she's a musician. She sings in community choirs and musical theater. She volunteers in soup kitchens and is a volunteer hike and activities leader with the Appalachian Mountain Club. She serves on church committees. She lives a full, rich, amazing life. And so being good at being sad is what allows her to be happy despite all the heartbreak she has endured and that she continues to live with. And so thanks for showing up, and showing up, that's a skill right there. Thank you so much for joining me, and I see we have some time left if anybody wants to ask any questions or have a conversation. Again, I'm not seeing chat, but if you, Roy, I don't know if people are muted or if you have to unmute them or if they can unmute themselves, but just speak right up and let me know if you have any questions or something caught your attention.
Hi, Elizabeth. It's Sandy.
Sandy, how are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to share, my youngest daughter had many bouts of depression, and the whole talk about a skill at sadness, we've actually been having this conversation many times, and it's really interesting how in society you're taught, oh, don't cry, or, don't show your emotion. And I have to say that that's probably one of the biggest things to overcome for depression is just accepting that sadness and allowing it to flow through. And tears is one of the things she always says. If she can just let the tears out, then she knows she's not carrying the weight of that sadness any longer.
That is so true. I mean, it's so important to be able to discharge it rather than just leave it in ourselves. You know, and I think that was one of the things that I loved about what Robin had to say, that sometimes we have to help ourselves get to that tearful point. It's like it's going to be a bad analogy, but it's kind of like throwing up. We fight it and fight it and fight it, but we'll just throw up when you feel so much better. But we don't want to do that, and so finding ways that open up that gate, like music, that's often an opening. Or even if you see, like, say you're watching a sad movie, you won't cry for yourself, but you get kind of encouraged. It kind of paves the way for you and lets that pathway open, and then it's so much better because there are actually neurochemical changes that happen with the release of tears. So tears are definitely a very useful way to discharge, for sure. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you brought that up, Sandy. Anybody else have any comments?
Yeah, Elizabeth, this is Alan. I'm in Michigan, and I'm wondering, that was an excellent presentation. I enjoyed it very much, but is it possible to get a copy of your slides? Can I get it by email, a copy of the slides?
Absolutely. You can email me directly.
And how do I do that?
I'll give you my email address. It is E. Clayton. So that's ECLAYTON at northernlight.org. Northern Light is one word. And I'm sure you can also email anybody at the Schoodic Institute, and they can definitely, I'll send my slides to them, and they can send them out as well. But if you'd like to email me directly, please feel free to.
Okay, so it's E. Clayton at northernlights.org.
At Northern Light.
Oh, light, just light.
Just light.
No S.
At northernlight.org. Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
I may be the farthest away from any participant. As I said, I'm in Michigan. Is everybody else there in Maine?
That's a good question.
Maine.
Maine? Anybody? How did you get involved with? Are you on a mailing list for the Schoodic Institute or something? How were you aware of this?
We have a summer home on Mount Desert Island.
Yeah.
So I'm very familiar with Schoodic, and we're there from June to October. But so
Wonderful.
then the obvious question is, if you have a summer home in Maine, why in the world do you have a winter home in Michigan?
Well,
I don't have a good answer for that, other than that's where we've been.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions or anything they would like to share?
I had a question in the beginning. Nick mentioned that you're doing mindfulness and I didn't hear what day or times. Could you share more information on that and if it's open to the public?
It is open to the public, and actually my last slide is right here, and I have links to catch up, and I have a link to that ice music video that we watched, and I also have a link to a book called Wintering. In a longer version of this presentation, I had referred to this book that Catherine May had written, which was really beautiful. It really talked about how the rhythm of the season, how you can use the calendar, and how to help advance things along, and how particularly in the winter it's so important that we have holidays, that we have festivals, just like Schoodic Institute is doing. Creating those very regular celebrations or events or occasions or festivities that make time just roll by. They don't let things stay. So that book, Wintering, was a book that she had written after she had to take a little break from life for a while. She had been taking care, all of us, her husband got sick very suddenly, unexpectedly. And ended up recovering, but it was a very traumatic event for her. And after that, she ended up having something of a nervous breakdown herself. And so she had to take time out. And as she took time out, she really came to think about those time out periods in our life as wintering, and how in wintering it allows us, it's a different kind of season that allows for something more deep and reflective. I mean, it brings its own kinds of benefits. And so it was, wintering for her was really a metaphor for those times that we all go through, those low periods that we just need to rest and restore and be reflective and heal ourselves. And so anyway, because I had borrowed some of those concepts of the rhythm and the calendar and that sort of thing, I wanted to include a link to that. So if you want my slides, definitely you will get those links you'll get those links plus a bunch of other slides in the back that I ended up not using. Anything else? Anything else anybody wants to share or ask? I hope it was helpful. Can I just ask, did this give you any ideas that you hadn't necessarily heard of or thought of before? Hopefully you'll have something that you can take away anyway.
I don't have any suggestions for improvement, but I will say I thought that the comments, not the comments, but the points you made, and that's why I asked for the slides, they were very, very helpful. I couldn't keep notes fast enough, so that's why I asked for the slides. But I thought it was just an outstanding presentation. So thank you very much.
I'm so glad it was useful to you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have been able to do that, to have been asked by the Schoodic Institute to come up with something on this topic. Well, on that note, let me just say thank you once again. It's been fun, and enjoy the rest of your day. I hope that you are taking advantage of more of the offerings that the Schoodic Institute is providing at this point in the winter for you, for all of us. And take care. Take good care.
Thank you.
Elizabeth,
Thanks, Elizabeth.
gonna go outside. I'm gonna take your suggestion and head outside now.
Oh, perfect. That's absolutely perfect. That is leveraging nature for sure. See you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I will stay on the line a little bit extra if somebody wants to hang out for a little bit and talk. So I'll be the last one off the call.